I just want to tell you that. In fact, I was talking last night that we need to come up with like some kind of, award. And so recommendations will be accepted. I was thinking like a nice badge, like that had a 3 on it or something like that. But I think we had a great night last night. I'm glad you guys are still here. We do have some interesting things to take place this morning. I'm going to now introduce, Ross had to head back. He's in a wedding over the weekend. We've impressed into service Eric Sass. Eric is located in Los Angeles. He's a reporter for MediaPost. He covers mainly publishing now. He's in fact the editor of Publishers Daily, which we publish. Have been doing so for almost a year. We do, of course, a Publisher Insider Summit as well. But Eric's been with us for, I think it's about 10 years or so, isn't it? He came to us after getting a degree in history at Duke. He got a degree in journalism at NYU. He actually worked for a couple of years in marketing for an architectural firm. He said, don't dwell on that too much when you introduce me, because I don't know. I don't think he was like the CMO or anything. But he's also a history blogger in his time that he's not writing for MediaPost. If you follow MediaPost publishing, you know he writes a lot, so I don't know when he does history blogging. But he does that, and he's published a book called The Mental Floss History of the U.S. I recommend it to you. So, Eric, come on up and lead us through the morning.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for sticking it out. You're the last ditch, the hardcore. You do deserve an award. So I'm taking over for Ross, who's at a wedding. And did anyone party with the nurses last night? Did we lose anyone to the nurses? I got here late last night, well, not late, but around 8 p.m., and they were already going, and then I swear to God, they woke me up at 6 a.m. because they were still going, some of them. I mean, I've never heard people laugh that loud after waking up at 6 a.m., so I assume that they had gone through the whole night. They are no joke. I thought media people like to party, but those nurses, that's crazy. Don't get caught up with them. So it's been a great conference so far. I'll just do a quick recap before we get into today's events. We started off with a sponsored presentation from Celigent about how to make sense of marketing in an era of constant change. Basically, you can never put your foot in the same river twice, according to Heraclitus, and I think that's actually very relevant to marketing. We also learned about the travails of traveling while American with the TSA. We heard from Charity Webb of Cabela's, who's going to be back up on my panel later this morning about their innovative in-house attribution and marketing program. We heard about the data deluge, dealing with the flood of data from everything from display to search to social media to events to e-commerce, and dealing with it in a dynamic business environment. And also dealing with the scarcity of data when you're not in control of the sales channel directly. Second day, we heard from, lifestyle marketing, 5 steps: diagnose the customer behavior, define the communication strategy, design the creative elements to engage, develop the data, and finally develop the marketing program, measure and adapt. Then we heard about cross-channel stewardship. We heard about a very interesting use of second screens from John Hancock Financial with their Life Comes Next campaign. And we heard from Pep Boys about their use of local data in marketing to kind of create and cultivate customer loyalty at the local level at a national chain, which is very interesting. And there was many others that I'm not going to go into because I don't want to waste too much time. Our first presenter today is Chris J. Snook from Ethology. He is a brand humanizer, and basically he's going to talk to us about the importance of maintaining the human element in cross-channel marketing across touch points, as well as some of the pitfalls, the ways not to do it, I guess, and then he will take us through a 12-step program to make sure that you do not succumb to those pitfalls and you do it right. And there will also be a reference to Walter White, I think, somewhere along the way. So please give a big hand for Chris J. Snook.
Summit this morning at 8 a.m. and I drove all the way down here from Scottsdale about 10 minutes, and when I got here it was canceled because of the party last night, so they gladly added me to your calendar. No, I'm just kidding. So Breaking Bad. Anybody watch that show? Yeah. Binge watchers? Loud and proud? All right. Yeah, I'm a binge watcher. I didn't even know that show, what it was, until like 2 years ago, and then I watched like all 5 seasons. But the nice thing is that we're not going to be talking about that show. It's just a good play on words of what we are going to be talking about, which is a 12-step program for healthy customer experiences. So we'll dive right in. If you are a fan of that show, I do kind of look like him. I thought about wearing the yellow jumpsuit and like the gas mask, but that would have been a little too much. But how many of us, honestly, kind of shifting gears, how many of us today lose sleep at night over what's happening to our brand that's not in our control? Okay, so all of you should come up and talk about what I'm going to talk about, because the rest of you already have it figured out in the most part, sounds like, in the sense that we push a lot of stuff out, we do engagement, we do all these different channels, and yet there's that piece that we used to not know about, and we didn't know that we didn't know about it, so it didn't bother us. But now we know that we don't know about it, right? And this concept of remember my name, as a marketer, that's like used to be, I think it still is, but it used to be the be-all, end-all, right? If I can get you to remember me, then I've done my job. How many of you realize that something my mentor told me years ago was people remember you at your worst, not your best? How many of you believe that is true? I'll prove it to you. Joe Paterno. What picture flashes across the screen of your mind when I say Joe Paterno? The first picture. Scandal or greatest college coach ever? Right? Whole life doing things a certain way. A brand, arguably one of the biggest brands in college football or sports in general, dinged by something that happened at the end of it. Yes? Kobe Bryant. Did he rape that girl? Right? The point isn't whether or not, it's not about those specific instances. The point is that's how fragile brand is. That's how, and brand is not something that we get to define anymore solely, is it? It's now defined by who? More and more each day, yes or no? So how many B2B marketers do we have? Primary B2B. Okay, B2C? Mix of both. Anyone really heavy on direct to customer? Okay, a couple of you. You're Rome, right? And then what do you do? Experian, okay. Really? With the credit score stuff now? Is that, okay, gotcha. All right, so remember what we're gonna work through today is how do we try and prevent, or better yet, react when the worst thing that could happen happens. Uber, another one. What do you think of? When I say Uber, what do you think of right now? Shootings. Now, is it fair enough to say that there's probably an employee, well, everyone who has been involved in some kind of mass shooting, which is terrible, in the last year, worked somewhere, yes? Because they had to have enough money to buy a gun or something. So everyone who's been involved in something like that works somewhere, yet Uber, right, is kind of getting blamed now or involved in a brand way. If you ask most people what happened, they won't put the rest together. They'll just say Uber and shooting like we just did in summary. Not two things we want linked with our brand, right? So we want them to remember our name the right way, but the step we have to admit first, so 12-step, first one is, we admit that we're powerless over the demands of always-on marketing. Like we can't stop it, right? So a little play on words for anyone who's familiar with 12 steps. This is true, like we have to do this. We're powerless over it. We can't stop someone from doing something silly who happens to work for us or drive for us or do whatever, right? We can't stop that. So marketing today is always on. Whether we're on or not, it's always on. And the truth is it's only going to get harder. So the first step is let's just admit we're powerless over it and then figure out what to do next. 81% of shoppers research online before making big purchases. These are some stats that you probably are aware of, maybe you're not. 88% are less likely to return to a site after a bad experience. Bad experiences can happen where and when? When have you had a bad experience?
All the time.
Don't name the brand, but say an instance.
Trying to buy
Trying to buy tickets for a concert. Did that happen at the portal level? Did that happen after you purchased the ticket and you were trying to print them off? Did that happen at the venue? Where did it happen when you had the bad experience? Trying to get them out of the portal? I think I know who you're talking about because I had a similar experience. We won't name them, but I bought tickets and then literally, go in, try and print the ticket. Can't print. Call the number. Guess who doesn't answer? Nobody. Go back, hit refresh. It says right there, print the ticket. Do that for 5 minutes in a world where we've become accustomed to getting what we want, right? Thank you, Amazon. Thank you, Uber, for all the user interfaces that have now made our expectations ridiculous in a good way, but like hard if you're trying to catch up. Can't print a ticket. Very frustrating. Then call, and then the person on the other line finally answers 3 days later. I finally decide I'll just wait for 30 minutes on hold. They answer, and I said, knowing that they're probably not at fault, I'm sorry, I'm frustrated, but I really need to get this ticket because I got to go take a client to this event. Can you help me? And it was a 2-minute fix. I said, why can't I do what you just did? I don't know. I'm sorry. It happens all the time. Powerless. Right? So, step 2. We've come to believe that a power greater than ourselves, our customers, can give us the right singular focus to restore our sanity. I was talking with AstraZeneca over breakfast and found out that they are shifting to a customer focus, which I find really interesting. Challenging in its own right. I'm sure we'll get to that a little bit in the workshop. But how many of you have shifted this internally, or how many of you still have silos or real fundamental operational issues around aligning this focus internally? Like, how many of you made the shift and it's aligned and your corporation or your company is like, yes, the customer is not just right, they are all that matters? Okay. How many of you have made that decision in your teams or whatever, but are facing inertia that is really difficult to navigate? Okay. How many of you aren't going to raise your hand no matter what I say because it's not 10 o'clock? All right. Thanks for playing along. Modern search today, what is it? The search channel. As a channel, what is search today? If we were to tell it to my 4.5-year-old son Beckett, how would you explain modern search to my 4.5-year-old? An encyclopedia. What else would you say?
Typing in a word.
Typing in a word. What else? He's super cute. Try and help him out. 4.5. He wants to know what modern search is.
Word would not know what an encyclopedia is.
You're right. It's 9:30 and I really haven't.
No, but I appreciate the participation. There's no wrong answer. There's no wrong answer. I'm curious. Questions and answers. What else? Anything over here? Modern search. What is it?
Expected.
Our simple definition at Ethology for it, my simple way of relating to it is it's self-directed, real-time, problem-solving, on-demand. You're right. That's why I'm asking you for help. Because I said that to him and he's like, that sounds, lots of words, Daddy, lots of words. So a 4.5-year-old still wouldn't understand that, but that is what it is, right? If we, what do? We go Starbucks and it starts to say near me. We find out we have a flat tire. Mark Yagoto, who's with me today, got a flat tire yesterday. I don't know if this is true, Mark, or not, but I would imagine when I've had a flat tire, the first thing I do is, other than the obligatory F-bomb, is I type in, tire stores, Scottsdale. I'm not doing that because I'm interested in researching tire stores, am I? I'm doing that because in real time, on demand, I want to know who can help me and at what price. Anyone else do that? You're running late to a meeting. How many of you realize, how many of you looked up this address at the airport when you were heading here? When did we look it up? At 80 miles an hour on the 143 freeway, which is 2 exits north of here. Hey, dude, do you know where this is? No, but hold on. Real-time problem solving on demand, right? What if Arizona hadn't had, or the Grand Resort didn't have optimized local listings? I wouldn't be talking to you right now, or I'd be sweating because I would have gotten here late, right? So it's the way that we are now, and these moments of truth that you've probably heard that coined by Google and other people. Moments of truth are these inflection points where we have a real need, a real time, and something happens, good, bad, or indifferent, and we have and that's the relationship at that touch point that we have with that brand or that interface. Does that make sense? So the moment of truth is I bought the tickets. It's the day of the concert. Let me go print them off. Fail. So when we bought the tickets, how do we probably feel? Probably felt excited, right? Then there was another moment we shared with our spouse or our friend or whoever we were going to. I got us tickets, right? Now, if the phone call dropped because we had crappy cell service, moment of truth, I was excited. I'm ready to share the person that I bought tickets with. What's going to happen? And XYZ, I won't list one, but my cell carrier drops the call again because I'm in whatever area or in my house. Now what happens? I hate that carrier, or I hate my house, or my neighbor, whatever, right? I go down. Then they call, oh, I'm so excited. We feel good again. Then we go to print them off. Fail, can't, stressful, whatever, right? So these are these moments of truth, and every single one of them we're not necessarily knowing about. We know that they happen because we're all customers of something, aren't we? So people are more loyal to their need in the moment than to any particular brand. Think about that. Think about the journey we just did, real brief. What are they loyal to? The need, not the brand. So that's that makes us really challenged. That's a tough gig. You've all signed up for like the worst job in show business. They're loyal to the need, not the brand, and yet we have to be there at every point in that need to be the brand they choose. That's a lot of work. How many of you realize that you're doing that with same or limited resources from before, with ever greater exponential expectations? Yeah. So that's your reality, right? So that's why, again, we know that's the reality. So what we're going to do is step 3. We have to take fearless inventory of our insights, vision, and execution and score them. How many of you have a process for doing this in your company, where you look at your journeys, your customer journey maps, the personas, whatever it is, and you score them regularly, quarterly or biannually or something? Do you have an audit system internally for that across the different channels? You're shaking your heads. Do you do it in all the channels, like individually? Do you kind of aggregate it? Both. Okay. How often do you do it? Quarterly or monthly? Excellent. And where are you from? I'm sorry.
Cabela's.
Oh, Cabela's. Excellent. Oh, yeah, man. A lot of stuff in that store. A lot of stuff. Okay, I was in Fort Collins a couple years ago, living there when you guys opened the one that's in Thornton. Yeah. That was like Disneyland. Like the 25 freeway literally shut down, I think, that day. People were camped out for 24 hours beforehand. That was something else. All right, 57%. How many of you seen this stat before? 57% of the buyer's journey is decided before they talk to you. So you got a third of the way to go to push them over. So everything else that they're doing, engaging with your brand, is happening before you know it. Anyone born or grew up coming of age in the 90s, like me? Went to college, whatever. Do you remember record stores? Anyone ever do this on a Thursday or Friday or some night, right, where you go in and it's like all the Pearl Jam bootleg stuff, and you're just flipping through it, and like you're kind of just killing 30, 40, 50 minutes, and there was somebody working over there, and you didn't go in to buy anything specific, but you're just kind of browsing, and then you kind of buy something on the way out, and it may not be a full price CD, but it's like something used or something. I did that because of some level of obligation. Like I didn't feel like that person owned it that was behind there, but there was this like, I'm taking up space in your world, you're paying rent for this thing, I'm entertaining myself, probably should leave with something. That doesn't happen on Amazon. Like they're actually watching us more than that person was. But we don't have the same guilt because we can float around on Amazon and load up our wish list or load up our shopping cart at whatever store we're on, Cabela's or otherwise. We can deck it out, and although you have the data on me about what I want, I don't have any obligation in that moment to buy. There's no interaction with a person that's kind of tipping me over like those old record store things. Barnes & Nobles, bookstores, same kind of thing, right? Have you ever felt guilty selecting 15 books in Amazon or Kindle and not buying them? But have you ever gone to a Barnes & Noble and had a really good time and not bought something and walked out and said, I'm the reason these guys are going to go out of business? I hope they don't go out of business because I like coming here and not buying crap and sitting and reading a bunch of stuff for free. But that's the conundrum. So 60% of them are already done. The challenge is to be in the spaces where our audience are and understand they will leave us if we don't work with them and understand their needs. All right, but me talking at you is like this emoji graphic. So we're going to just talk with each other, hand out a couple things, and we're going to do a simple exercise around this. So we're not going to get into it in depth today, but we have something called the Experience Marketing Framework we developed at Ethology. Essentially, it is the 3 walls of purpose, people, and process for the sake of developing a cross-channel purpose-focused strategy with human-centric tactics and data-fed iteration that measures what's valued, not values what's measured. So we'll get to that in a second, but remember, measuring what is valued is more important than valuing what's measured. So how many of you have read Jean Bliss's stuff? Anybody know who Jean Bliss is? Jeanne Bliss. She wrote a book called Chief Customer Officer 2.0, I believe is the most recent one. Anyway, she talks about 5 competencies. You want to write it down. It's good stuff. At the end of the day, there's 2 commitments that she talks about in customer experience, and that is the commitment to customer experience reliability and then innovation, right? So how are we optimizing the reliability across touch points? And then how are we innovating our customer experience journey as an organization so that we can scale that? So we've built this framework to help companies start to think through that. But Jean Bliss is great. If you haven't read her, you should. I'm going to walk around. Mark, if you can help me hand these out a little bit. How many of you flew here? Okay, great. Anyone have a favorite airline? Delta? Southwest? Southwest people? 1 or 2, really? Where do you guys fly? Or do you just take whatever's cheapest? All right, we're going to use airlines as a thing because I don't think there's an airline business in here. So we're going to use them as a little example since most of us know what it's like to fly. I think everyone got one? Who doesn't have one? Oh, all right, I think I got an extra one here. All right, so the next 9 steps we're just going to do together. So I'm going to request your participation because it'll be a lot more fun that way. The insights that we gain happen while we're executing. How many of you have been executing across one of your channels and had an aha moment about a way to do something different? Recently, let's just say last 30 days. Have you ever had an insight? Okay, what was it?
If you're going to do something, you have to do it really big.
Okay, and what caused that insight?
Because we've been testing big and small with the group. My role is B2B.
Yep.
You just sort of stick your toe in the water, just get wet feet. Versus if you really try to dominate what you're doing, then you build your brand much more effectively than easy.
So is that insight exclusive of whether that campaign was successful or failed because you did it big enough to at least cause enough of a result to know?
We did enough of the bigs and enough of the smalls to know that if we're going to make a choice to do something, it's a big.
Okay, so insights occur while executing, yet if we could have more insights more predictably, then we could innovate more frequently and at scale, yes or no? Right, like we get them and sometimes they're great, but sometimes we don't know how to deploy them. So what we're going to start to use is this first layer here that you're looking at is the insight layer. And it's just a simple triangle graph to start to bucket the things that typically come together that help us gather an insight. So these happen independent of us, but if we start to think through them, we might. So the one I'll use just as an example so that we can kind of normalize it and just all have a little fun is the transparency idea, the campaign that Southwest has. How many of you have seen that? Okay, so let's think about transparency as a campaign, and let's think about the insights let's debrief it. What are some of the insights they have moving forward, but also what are some of the insights they had that maybe help them come up with how to deploy that across channels, not just come up with a big idea and then have it fall flat with their customer. So step 4 is we've clearly defined the customer personas we care deeply and serve. Who's the customer? Look at the top of your triangle there, and feel free to take notes on that if you want. You can take it with you. Who's the customer that Southwest serves? The different personas. Who do they serve? Budget conscious. Who else? Business traveler. Who else? Commuter. Good. Because business traveler and commuter could be different because the commuter is using it much more frequently, right? All right, so they've defined that. So what you would do is you'd sit there and you'd say, okay, here's the 3 to 4 customer personas we have at AstraZeneca, at Blendtec, whatever. And maybe there's 20, right? Depending on how many you have. And then you start to think through, at that level, how defined and how well do we know that customer's journey across the domain of their experience, right? And then bottom left, before we get to that, who is our competitors and where do we sit? So Gartner's Magic Quadrant, people have used that one? BCG, right? Matrix. So whatever one you're using to understand your position in market share, you would look bottom left and you'd say, where do we fit today? Like, where's our customer experience and where is our market share as it relates to loyalty and revenue and growth set against our competitive set? And so you'd graph that and then you'd start to think through, what are they doing better than we are, or which personas do they have that we don't, and how can we win? So that's step 4. Step 5 is to start to benchmark against those competitors. Step 6 is then to say, what are the macro forces, right? So if you look at the bottom right of that insight layer, it's forces. What are forces? Who wants to tell me what forces are?
Things outside of your control.
Perfect answer. That's perfect. It's stuff outside of our control. It could be technology forces. It could be legislative forces. It's stuff that marketers may or may not always think about, right? But you have insights as marketers because you are aware of them. But maybe you never bucketed them that way. For instance, how many of you have been driving down the road, seen a competitor's shop, whether it's Bass or whatever, or walked through that and had an insight about Cabela's? Like, has that ever happened? How many of you have seen something happening online or watched a commercial or dinner with someone you care about and you get an insight because of some like macro thing that's not even in your industry that you see on the news behind the bar and you go, oh, that's not good, or that's an opportunity. Like, has that ever happened? So those are forces at work. What we're trying to do is say you have the power to lead your organization, start to put those forces to paper on an audit every 30 days, say what forces are coming that we're thinking about. There's a new election coming up. What's that going to do to media spend? Right? We all know that, right? The next year is going to be terrible for direct response because it's all going to get bid up. So these are macro forces that have nothing to do with your and my business, but that are impact our channel called media buys on direct response TV, right? So what are the forces that are impacting you? Another one would be Airbnb's coming and we're Hyatt or we're Hilton. And our persona is we sell to budget traveler type people. And now all of a sudden there's this thing called Airbnb where people are sharing their homes and it's priced in our bracket and it's a different experience altogether that we can't deliver and pivot to, and they don't own any real estate and they don't have any employees that staff that thing. What's that force, right? The platform shift, the consumer shift. So you want to look at the insight layer, you want to start to look at competitive set, market forces, technological, legislative, and then who's my customer I care about, and start to gain the 3 to 5 to 10 insights that you're going to start to go up a layer and set to your vision. Now, vision without a strategy will have you feeling like this graphic here, right? It's a pipe dream. So vision layer is the next one. If you flip your handout over, you'll see another triangle. This is where you're setting strategy, which essentially means you're prioritizing and planning to a schedule. Simplest way, Ken, 4.5-year-olds still won't understand it, maybe next year, but prioritize and plan to a schedule that fits these things. So the first step in that section is step number 7 of 12, which is we have clear alignment between our current C-suite business goals, our customer goals, and our marketing objectives. How many of you have clear alignment between your business goals for this year or this quarter and your customers' needs or goals? How many of you feel like you have that? That's a tough one, right? It's hard enough sometimes to say our business goals are 1, 2, and 3, and our marketing objectives map to that. That's like a win in and of itself, right? But then we go, well, wait, if our marketing objectives map to our business goals, do our business goals match to our customers, the personas we care about, goals and needs? So in your audit, have that conversation. Start to think through that, right? So that's the top of the second triangle. And then what you're doing is you're flying down and you're saying, okay, do we have a documented customer journey? Some do, some don't. Most of you know what it is. So if you don't have a documented one, that's something you want to start to put in place and update. If you do have one, you want to audit it and start to refresh it as needed based on step number 7. And the customer journey might be for each product line, right? So you might have tons of them, depending on how large you are. And you have different customer sets. So in your case, you have a customer journey for the doctor, physician, and that constituent. And then you have the customer journey for me, the person who has back pain or, oncology needs or whatever it may be. So how documented those? And then where do you stack? Again, if you look at the bottom left, that's where touch points is. That's above where your competitive market share analysis in the research layer was, because ultimately what we're saying is, look at the touch points, because your competitors compete against those same touch points, don't they? Big O Tire and Discount Tire are all trying to solve his problem yesterday, and his journey's the same regardless of who he chooses, yes or no? So, where does your company stack in comparative on those touch points, happiness to miserable, against your competitors that matter to market share? And where's the biggest opportunity for arbitrage? Like, in other words, if I move the needle here 10, 20 points at this touch point, that one has the yield, right, to my retention, to my referral rate, whatever. And that's one I can calibrate to the scope, bottom right, step 9, which is my budget of resources, people, money, and time. So if I can calibrate my scope to the touch points that I can pick to execute one or more of these insights that have the biggest shift, I don't have to solve for it all. And we already know we can't. We don't have enough time, budget, or money. And even if we did, Always On Marketing is going to make sure there's 15 more things to fix tomorrow that we don't have budget and time for. So we're powerless over that. But what we can take power over is one or two things that we can put together. Does that make sense? Questions on any of that? No? All right. Moving up a level, now we're executing. So a lot of times as an agency, right, we get what everybody gets. Come in, what's your need? Well, my need is my performance media team is not I'm not getting enough strategy out of them, or I've been with them for a while, I'm some new ideas, right? Or you go and you say, well, my in-store, my creative team is not coming up with any fresh things. And so you go and you pick a vendor or partner, or you look at your team and you say, get me better this, get me more of that. Well, that's the execution layer, right? Like, you're looking at the result and you're saying, how do we change that result? And in some cases, that's where we start. And that's where it makes sense to start. That's what we would call the reliability loop. In our world, that's what we call the reliability loop, which is this horizontal, learn, plan, do, learn, plan, do, learn, plan, do, where we are iterating based on the feedback we're getting and we're trying to tweak, but we're doing that against the set strategy that exists today. Does that make sense? Because there's no time to stop the strategy, right? We're executing every minute of every day. So how do we tighten the reliability of what the strategy we're currently running? And at the same time, how do we start to think about the strategy we want to set the next cycle? You can do both, but you can't think about them as two things that exist on the same plane. Because if you do, one will always trip up the other. It's kind of like running a race with someone faster than you on the same track with one lane. If you're trying to innovate and be reliable in the same plane, what happens? One or both don't happen. Because someone trips up and both are on the ground, and then everyone's frustrated. So think about, how many of you have ever read Critical Path by Buckminster Fuller? That's an old one. You're going to need a dictionary to read it, because he's a really smart guy, and I still don't know what some of those words mean, but it is worth the effort. Here's a snapshot. He talks about interlocking loops that look like this, and the reason why he says that is every relationship is better if it's in orbit than if it's linked. And the reason is because in an orbit, linking around each other, this one can spin faster than this one without disrupting the relationship. Your customer may spin at a certain revolution, and you may be able to spin and execute at another one. And if we try and keep up with them, or we try and force them to our pace, both of us gets disrupted. But if we can think about it as an orbital loop, right, we can coexist and we can serve at the pace that we're ready to, and they can consume at the pace that they want. Does that make sense? So just visualize that a little bit. Step 11, we've humanized our tactics. This is getting down and dirty with ethnographic research and just looking at every channel and doing the work. I was talking with Sharon, and she said, I think it was you that was talking about you talk with your customers in the customer service level. People have read about Zappos, doing this where the first 2 weeks of every person who gets hired there we go. So the job is to take customer service calls, right? No matter what your job is, they make you do that. And that's part of just humanizing your culture, humanizing your brand. At the end of the day, there are customers. A relationship like a marriage or any other relationship, we got to take the time to invest in it. And then 12, we measure what we value versus value and what being measured. So flying through those 12, mo data, mo problems, right? The take-home message is the opposite of Breaking Bad is making good. We're marketers. We make promises every single minute of every single day. That's what we do. But we got to make good on those promises. And we can lead, even though it's tough in certain organizations with silos, we can lead our organization to an alignment around customer experience as the be-all, end-all metric. And by doing that, we can start to make good on the promises we've made. So, questions, I'll be around if you need after. Thanks for having us out. That's where you can find us.
All right, thank you very much. For our next act, I'm going to ask my panelists to come on up, and we'll, if we can, we'll sit in alphabetical order. There they are. Perfect. Hello.
This feels like small group therapy or something.
All right, yeah. Well, it will be small group therapy, in a way. It's okay to talk about your feelings. Okay, so our final panel of the show is on attribution's evolution, how cross-channel attribution has changed and is continuing to change. And for this, we have assembled a panel of experts. I will go through, and then I'll ask you to go through and kind of give a quick description of your company and what they do. So to my immediate left, we have Juan Lesmes. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Director of Digital Media Strategy for iCrossing. To his left, we have Shruti Tiwari, Associate Media Director for Sapient Nitro. And to her left, we have Charity Webb, Display Manager for Cabela's, who spoke earlier in a keynote interview and is coming back. She's kind enough to do double duty for this conference. So yeah, if you could just quickly say what you guys do or what your position is and what your company does and all that.
Sure. So, as Eric said, Director of Digital Media Strategy at iCrossing. Believe it or not, I do strategy at iCrossing. My agency is just a modern marketing agency, not unlike every other one you've heard up here.
I work at Sapient Nitro, and Sapient has a 360-degree view of more from the content strategy perspective to digital media. And of course, attribution is one of the key things that we're going to be talking. So, yep, so pretty much handling that.
Said Charity Webb, Cabela's specialty retailer. I head up the digital media team there. Also tapped to make sure our channels are fully integrated from a data perspective and those multiple touch points from an attribution perspective.
Cool. All right, so I will just dive in. So, I mean, in a sense, you could say attribution is sort of everything for marketing when it comes to determining ROI and to planning. But there's still a great deal of hesitation, I feel like, and when it comes to adopting different attribution models or any attribution model. Can we quickly talk about what are some of the hurdles that are currently blocking advertisers from really embracing attribution?
I mean, put simply for me, it's labor and costs. You're not only investing in the technology, but you also have to invest in the people that are actually going to do the analysis. And I think that that is much more than what people anticipate when they're going in. Attribution sounds really fancy and nice, and it's going to solve all our problems. But by the time you put the number in front of the client or even the internal agency, it's much harder pill to swallow.
And in our case, I mean, I think the biggest challenge, firstly, it's a Saturday, so let's actually, I know attribution can be a very, very tense, sort of like a very dense subject, I would actually say. But in our case, I think what I have noticed that again, from the people investment that is required both from the client side as well as from the agency perspective and the time that is required. That definitely is the case. It's the overwhelming situation of the changing technology and the media that it's happening and growing. So it's like the next thing, the mobile, then web, and of course offline has always been there. So that kind of like the big data is where the client is, I think, in many cases, the conversation is much more harder. And then when you start to move up the conversation, it's just the adaptation or the adoption of understanding it is a little bit of a challenge. So those are the few things that is making this attribution conversation a little bit more harder than we wanted it to be.
To echo your point, I think the unknown, I came from the agency side as well, the unknown is tough to battle. I think that is probably one of the key factors, as well as cost.
Cost and the unknown.
Jean-Michel, though, who's not here right now from Bookrunner, he made a great point yesterday, is complicating it. There's some brands that don't need to complicate it with attribution. Right. So there's probably also that layer as well.
So I would actually like to chime in on that. So I actually had the same insight that you did, in that we work with a lot of different brands, and some of them, attribution makes a whole lot of sense. If you're a retail brand, if you're a large telco brand that has a direct response channel, absolutely go into attribution. But if you're doing B2B and you're maybe one of those other brands that's playing in the upper funnel, I'm not sure that attribution is going to solve a lot of your problems. And in some cases, it might just tell you what you already know. And I think that that's what, as marketers, we have a fear of saying to our clients is, hey, what attribution is telling you is actually what we already know and what I already suspected. And I think it's okay to be right and admit to the client that you were right. But I think that, yeah, if you're a client that's maybe in the upper funnel, attribution doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless you're willing to invest the dollars.
So, I mean, can you just explain a little bit more what sort of brands are sort of better candidates for an admittedly costly attribution model, B2C and lower funnel? Could you give some examples?
I mean, in terms of like a direct RO, like if there is usually I've noticed in specifically the retail vertical is a perfect example where this example makes perfect sense. But in case of, say, CPG, I think they will be much better off implementing more brand lift or brand awareness or brand tracker kind of studies versus getting through the attribution, because until the beacon, it's a whole another conversation. It comes to attribution for those kind of brands. So I think from retail perspective, it definitely makes sense. What is my sales? How am I interacting with the brand? What is driving that conversation and driving the consumer journey and conversion? I think that kind of definitely is different. But what you hear, and as you said, is that it definitely is not going to be anything different than what you already know. And I think as a marketers, we just need to be confident into what the story is. Like, you will not stop buying TV because we know that TV has that influence. Yes, at what percentage? Maybe, it can vary, but I think that the media mix doesn't change how you buy based on the attribution story.
Okay. Is there, given the significant cost associated with some of these attribution models, is there any value in a sort of a discount or a basic model that kind of covers some of it, or for some brands that might work just as well or work as well enough?
I think you look at a tool like DoubleClick Campaign Manager, and it gives you just enough. It gives you path to conversion. It gives you insights such as that, where you can make relative decisions. You can also make action-based decisions. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, it takes someone who's much smarter than myself to take that data and push it through an algorithm and give you further insight.
Yeah, and I think, as we call poor man analysis, there is, some companies that cannot make huge investments towards those. It's not that you cannot do attribution. It is something you can get a little bit beyond than last click. It's not a perfect, but I think we've overheard the U-shaped model, the first touch versus last touch in Google Analytics, as well as in DoubleClick, that can give you an idea in terms of interactions, and that can tell you that, okay, if you are between display or search or email, if there is some sort of a story that you can build, it definitely will tell you. It's not a perfect, but that's a free and easier way to start to, like get into if you've never dealt with it. But there are vendors and clients now. I think in a previous presentation we were talking about it. It's like it's on a real-time basis. Like people want it like very quickly.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of partial attribution for some clients, and I think that poor man's attribution is actually a funny way to put it, right? Because Google Analytics even allows you to look to that path to conversion that you were saying earlier. So I think that, yeah, partial attribution does make a whole lot of sense for some people. And in some cases, I think it might even tell an easier story for the client, because then you're just talking about touch points, where that model tends to break down, at least in my personal opinion, is when you're trying to account for offline activity. And I think that that's where some of the more premium vendors bring a better perspective.
So on that topic, you mentioned the vendors, and we heard some already mentioned. Are there any standouts among the attribution vendors that you've worked with, good or bad? And I don't know if there are any that are present, but feel free to speak freely, since you're the clients.
That's what everybody says, so I plead the fifth.
Yeah, never trust a journalist when they tell you that. That's always a bad sign. No, but are there any experiences that have been really remarkably good or not so good that you can talk about?
I had a fortunate experience where I worked on the Dish Network brand on the agency side, where they, as soon as Odometry came to market, back when, before they were nabbed up by DoubleClick and Google, just really working with them and getting to work with folks that build that interface and who really represented that brand. It was interesting to see how they did it, but customer service was amazing. However, when you work with a company who's just at inception, you work through those pains with them. So there was the goods and the bads. Customer service was amazing, but then you have a look-back window of 90 days. So how actionable is that? You really need to wait a couple of years to be able to see the benefit from a planning perspective, and the way that the market changes. Does it make sense? Is data from a year ago, is that really going to help you 3 years down the line? I don't know. I can't answer that question right now. But one would say probably not in today's world. So I had great experiences with Odometry. Also worked with Convertro, Clear Sailing. I would say out of those three, Odometry was a little bit more leading in the marketplace from a full service perspective.
Yeah, and similarly, there is two vendors that I specifically had a great interaction with. One where where we want to really solve the real-time problem in understanding from the media planning and buying perspective and optimization. I know Convertro and Odometry, and they can actually get back to you, but it's a pretty long cycle of like when the reports come in the real-time basis. They're achieving to it. They're trying to. I mean, at least 6 months ago it wasn't there, but now I think they are evolving. I have worked with Encore Metrics as well as a couple of others that have actually made a real-time decision for us in terms of how the funnel metrics are working within the funnels, how display between search, email, paid social, all of them are interacting. So that is one of the tool that I've really worked. But of course, Convertro, has been a great experience working on.
Yeah, I've heard of those companies. I haven't worked with any of them. I've worked with Visual IQ quite a bit, and to your point earlier, I think that they do a really good job of not only selling the actual solution, but the people as well. And what I really like about their platform is not only the actual interface, but the fact that they can close the window pretty discreetly in terms of when you're getting data. So lately, we've been getting week-over-week lookbacks, which is much better than the 90-day window that you were talking about earlier, which I think is where attribution was almost a year ago for all vendors. So I think it's just a matter of finding the right solution, not only for your client, but looking at what that particular platform offers in terms of alignment for your individual client. So if it's e-com, you're going to want that look-back window that's a week long versus maybe a different client that doesn't need that.
So you all mentioned speed as being a particular factor here. how is the industry doing, or how are you doing individually in terms of getting the data back? Is in some cases it's weekly? Is it fast enough to sort of make adjustments to campaigns on the fly or in real time, or is it still mostly retrospective and therefore like for long-term planning?
It is still struggling in terms of like getting it in the real time, and I know, Charlie, we talked about it a little bit, that how quickly can we get this data to make those campaign optimization. I mean, Chris in his earlier presentation was saying that it's all about like we've, as a customer, became so much like we need things now in 5 minutes. I mean, the clients are the same thing as well. Like they can't wait for, all right, I'm going to do your attribution quarterly in 3 months, and then we're going to revise our strategy. They just want it very on a real-time basis, and that there is a need, and I think the attribution vendors are aware of it. They're trying to come up with very easy solution that we can go into web interface and try to spit out the data as quickly as possible. Is it there yet? Not yet, but I think there are few that are actually trying to catch up that race.
In my opinion, they should want to do that. You look at all of these attribution models outside of like a Visual IQ, and they were bought up by what? Media companies. So you look at is this agnostic, is it not? So if they really, if they want to progress there, why not push towards real time? I know that's a lot of data crunching, but I think that's a point that it at least needs to get to. From a Cabela's perspective internally, it's about bandwidth, right? Because we run our attribution internally, so do we have the manpower to make sure that we're running these reports on a regular basis?
Are you making those adjustments in real time or on a weekly basis?
Not
with your
right
own
now.
tool? Okay, just curious.
The issue of speed and real-time adjustment also connects us to the next topic, which is programmatic. Are attribution models keeping pace with the programmatic buying and selling systems that have been such a hot topic over the last 2 years? Do they integrate with them? Are some better integrated than others?
Good question.
I know, that was... All right, I'll take it.
Thank you, Shruti.
In terms of programmatic, I've had a very recent experience, and I will take the example of specifically Encore Media that my media team is actually integrated with. And what we have tried to, they've been actually we don't have to go through all of those tagging and all those long, lengthy process of implementing. So they have the API with DFA or flash talking, and they can easily get the data into. So what is happening is, and it's actually driving it to the placement level. So within programmatic, I think with the tool that I have currently in place, they're able to define what placements and how they're working. Viewability, ad fraud, all of that stuff, yes, that is something that we need to do. We need to do within our trading platform to make sure that what we are buying. So that's a separate issue. But from attribution perspective, I'm actually for one of my very big tourism client and travel client, we're able to actually see that if a person came to an X resort, did they go and purchase the other upsell, stuff that they purchased that, or also did they move to the other, there are like 13 resorts that we manage, so, did they go and buy another resort. So what was the entry point, what was the exit point, and who got the credit for that is, I think, a very, very interesting case study in its own that has been a huge success story for our media team here.
I think what I'll add to that, is that what she's talking about is something that requires a lot of labor at the very beginning. This ties back to our first point, right? You have to have the right tagging in place in order to actually execute against programmatic correctly. And if you're not putting that same effort into the attribution solution and actually trying to figure out where programmatic fits in the entire media mix and what its weight is, then I think you're going to fail. So I think that's where that question, it can be an easy one to answer or a really hard one to answer depending on client and the labor costs associated with it.
The way that our model is built right now, it's built off a flat cost. However, those are iterations that we need to make. We have direct API integrations with most of our partners, you would think another pass-back loop could be a dynamic CPM.
Shruti, you mentioned viewability and ad fraud. Those are, I mean, another hot topic for good or ill over the last 2 years, last year. Do you guys think that how does the conversation about attribution mesh with that argument or conversation, I guess, I make it more civil, about viewability and ad fraud? Are they should be complementary, it seems like, but are they actually sort of being brought together, those two topics? Or three topics, I should say.
Not yet, as much as we would want it to, because for programmatic, viewability is prime, definitely. I mean, if you're doing a direct buy, the viewability definitely is going to be higher. But from the programmatic perspective, it's something that the brands would want to optimize towards. It's an optimization tactic that they would want to do. Fraud, definitely, yes, absolutely. That is non-negotiable across the programmatic piece. But from the attribution perspective, it is the data that is the after the fact. Viewability and ad fraud is something that before we are buying it kind of is the metrics that we need to place in, or a tactic that we need to place in. Attribution is something that will redefine your benchmark. So if you have not had viewability or ad fraud metrics, and if you're looking at year-over-year metrics, your click-through rate is going to look down, your display is not driving as many clicks, your email is doing that. So there is some sort of a change in the story that may get impacted, or the benchmarks may change. So we need to be a little cognizant of that, and readjust and realign to what the new story that we're seeing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does.
I couldn't have said it better.
Well, you nailed it then. The third hot topic, ad blocking that everyone hates with a passion. What does that mean? The rise of ad blocking for attribution, if anything, or is it too early to tell?
Pointing to what she just said, you have to rely on your partners. You have to rely on the metrics. You have to be able to look at what is happening over time. But from an attribution perspective, there's no tie-in right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with Facebook and Google, I think they have. I think that's a very close-knit, and they do not allow that data to pass through and that information. So it is a challenge, and I'm hoping there's going to be a workaround it. But there are certain ways. There are a couple of tools, at least the one that we're working with right now, is able to give that story and get. I mean, I'm going to get technical, but so there is information available, but right now within Google and Facebook, with all of that closed loop that they have and ad blockings that they're going to be introducing very soon, it's going to be a huge challenge. So I would be very interested and keep the eye on the pulse of like how they're going to be attacking it.
How effective are the attribution techniques that are available right now for integrating non-digital? Because this is, as everyone likes to note, the vast majority of spending is still on broadcast TV, blah, blah, blah. So is it, but, not just TV, radio, out of home, print even, which still exists. It's still a thing. Are there techniques that can inspire confidence when they, as they sort of try to integrate these other channels?
In my opinion, there's very few partners that can actually do that sort of work. And as I was saying earlier, the premium ones seem to at least be thinking about it, and I think we're on the very cusp of getting that done much better. What's interesting about that is that Google itself hasn't even solved that equation, and they probably have the most data of anyone other than Facebook. So I think that that's something that's coming down the line, but I think that as we get better about stitching together the experience with even just one channel like search, we might be able to do better work in terms of broader attribution, and those premium companies or even the mid-tier companies that are attribution related will catch up.
In our case, that's why we built our attribution model, was because of that. And we have all this great data taking into account digital, offline, being retail, flyers, catalog, things of that nature, and how do we attribute that? And so I feel like that's what we actually do really well. That was my main selling point in going into Cabela's, because of that piece. And it's hugely important to our channels because 50 to 75% of our transactions actually happen in retail. So if we do not have this attribution model in place, our budgets wouldn't be what they are.
On that subject, well, where does the data come from for at Cabela's for the offline channels?
So retail, we call it a retail Cust ID, and then we have internet Cust ID. Retail Cust ID could be anything from email, household level information that's acquired in store. At the catalog and flyer level, it's a piece of code that when you call into a call center or when you go into a retail store to purchase, you have to provide that.
Charity, can you talk about your marketing stack in general? Because it sounds like you have quite a bit of technology already invested, either internally or with partners. I think that one of the things that we always talk about is having the right attribution layer, but we never really talk about all the other investments that need to happen in terms of getting data in and having the right analysis in place.
It's a major investment. We have a full data sciences team, an analytics team, IT security team. It is a full investment, so it really comes from the top down. From a leadership perspective, they have to be bought in. They actually have to be leading it, to be honest, and that's what happened in our situation. Is we had very smart people leading the company who saw the value in it, but on the executional side, you have to have partners willing to invest as well, willing to provide API level interactions with us from a digital perspective. So yeah.
I think that is actually a very good point, that from the investment perspective, it is not just agency's responsibility or the attribution partner's responsibility. It needs to come from the brand and from the leadership top down, and the investment, because you just can't delegate it and say, here, we've partnered with Visual IQ or Convertro, go iCrossing or Sapien Nitro and run with it. You cannot do that. I mean, it needs a very collaborative approach and that investment required, because the moment we all know, the moment you involve technology and IT people, it just increases the cost. So, yep, we need to make sure.
So, and the next question, Charity, was, talking about, because they're retail and it's important, but generally speaking, can the attribution techniques that are out there, are they connecting the dots to actual brick and mortar sales or e-commerce sales? Do they, but especially brick and mortar, because that's the real challenge, right? The offline crossover. How are they at that?
I think some third-party partners, they're able to take a file or an API integration and able to upload, but then that's another middleman, and that's something, at least on Cabela's side, we didn't want to have to do. We already had to work through IT security. We already have to work with our data sciences team and all these other folks to make it happen. You add another layer, it's more work, and in our world, you're already working with 20 people, and another person is another month of labor in conversations. So I do think there's partners out there where you can implement online transactions. It's just another step from our perspective.
You mentioned everyone being bought in, and at Cabela's, obviously, they are. With outside, when you're dealing with the agency world and the and clients, is there any friction or resistance at the C-suite level when it comes to explaining attribution and getting people to, frankly, spend money on it?
Never. Come on.
Oh, actually, we just the client we made a huge presentation about, this is what we're going to be doing, and here's how it's going to, and I don't want to name them, but it's where's the money coming from? Is it coming from your media? Nope. And then who's going to? So again, it's a little bit, and then going back and saying that okay, you're going to be doing more fractional attribution versus first touch or last touch. They're like, okay, so DM is only getting 0.05 of the order. Like, what is 0.05 of my product? So it is a challenge, but at least it was a challenge 2-3 years ago. The conversations are starting to become easy because the people that are moving within the ladder or the C-suite are getting much more, like they cannot ignore the conversation anymore. It is a part of something that they're mandated to do it. And I think I'm seeing like my struggle like 3 or 4 years ago versus now. It's a little bit more easier. It's a more budget conversation, which I think is we can get through that part.
And I mean, that was, I guess, going to be my question, is there institutional inertia because of, to put it in the politest possible way, a certain generational divide, and that's perhaps being addressed now? Is that sort of what you're hinting at? Hint, hint?
I
don't want to directly comment on that, but probably.
I would say yes. I mean, we're all friends here, right? It's a small group. I think that, yeah, if you're someone that's coming in and pitching a solution and the person on the other side of the table doesn't understand, either because they come from a maybe direct marketing role and they don't understand the digital marketing role, then that's going to be a point of friction. And I think it's going to be that way until we do a better job as marketers of selling it in correctly. And at the end of the day, that may be more about having the conversation that you just talked about versus trying to shove a technology solution down somebody's throat, right? And I think that that's unfortunately where most marketers start. It's like, hey, I have this great shiny thing, and it's going to do all these great things for you. It doesn't start with the business problem.
Comes out to our engineers.
Yeah, exactly.
And then just one more comment is like you have to crawl before you can run. So, I mean, I think showing that little approach of, all right, we'll take baby steps first and let's solve one problem, maybe leave the offline for a moment and try to get at least as much as 2 channels interacting between each other and understanding non-brand impact on display or display impact on paid search or email. So just taking small problems and trying to make those cases, I think, is now getting a lot more easier, and from the cost perspective as well, and building the case.
One more thing to that. What's also interesting about that is that when you go into these situations as an agency, a lot of people have their own budget, right? They have their media budget that they own, that they've been spending for 5 years, and they have a clear understanding of where that money goes. And when you tell them that you're selling them an attribution solution and that their budget might be smaller, they get scared. So like you have to kind of walk them through all of that.
Yeah. But it sounds like, I mean, like the basis of any good business, you're building it incrementally, proving it part by part, and then building up something bigger once you have established trust and things like that. As far as the generational thing, I mean, I think like the average tenure of the CMOs has been like 2 years or less for almost a decade now, so there's been a lot of turnover. I'll say it. You guys don't have to say it. I'll say it. My last question is, does the industry need any sort of standardization around definitions or metrics for attribution, or is that just inapplicable because it is the KPIs and the practice tends to be so tailored and customized to individual clients?
I think, like, leading back to your first question, it would help with selling this in, right? So if a client knows that something is standardized and this is what the industry is moving towards and these are the guidelines and the roles that this plays, then I think people might feel a little bit more comfortable with it.
Right, and in that case, I mean, there is a certain, the attribution is so customized solution that you have to sort of come up with your own methodology as well. So there is a middle ground. I would say that there definitely needs to be some sort of like understanding, okay, what the KPIs are within the TV GRPs translating into display impressions, what the impact is, how the interaction is. So we definitely need some benchmarking within the industry verticals to sort of compare against how we're doing and how things are impacting. But at the same time, you will have to do things that's working for your brand. It would be very different for a retail versus a telecom and versus a travel or a booking site.
Okay. I think, well, actually, I'm wrapping up early, it seems like. So we have time for questions. If anyone has questions, there's one. Omari's got you. Thank you.
Hi, Charity. This one's for you.
Hi.
You know, when we talk about Cabela's, everybody talks about what experience the store is. And it seems like, from an attribution standpoint, everybody's trying to say, well, the data says this. It's data, 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 data. Do you have any sort of customer research or primary customer research that goes into your attribution model to help determine, let the customer tell you how they heard about the location? And then the second question is your attribution different for new versus existing customers?
So I'd say, to your first question, no, it's not. We have that data, but it's not tied into our attribution model, but we do infer that. So Cabela's retail stores were built to be an event, right? So we do look at that, but it's not built within our attribution model. And then your second question was?
Do you treat existing customers different in attribution than new customers?
Not at the moment, and that's one of the big changes we're making. So because we have our own internal attribution model, we always have to be evolving. Straight to your point, is next on the list. We do not look at someone who's driving true net new to our business in any different way than someone who has closed a deal. And so, in my opinion, net new, someone who can do that really well should probably get a little bit more credit than someone who's just driving that last touch sale.
And I think, just to add to her, that I think that is an important part of the next step. Once you have the attribution piece, how are you speaking and connecting to those people is going to be the key from the customization of the messaging to build a better user experience. So this is just to add to that.
Anyone else? Any other questions? Okay, so I think if that's it, we will then move on to the roundtables. First of all, if you could please give our esteemed panel a hand, that was great. Thank you. And we will break up for the two roundtables. And yeah, thank you.